I recently bought a watch from Chrono24. Admittedly, I've bought quite a few watches recently from Chrono24, hashtag blame Alex. But when this particular watch arrived, it occurred to me that I think, anyway, in my opinion, the three reasons I bought this watch are the same three reasons that I think a lot of people buy Rolex watches. The first reason is, well, awareness, brand awareness, watch awareness. The watch that I bought is a very, very well-known and recognizable watch, certainly amongst the community, perhaps not so much amongst the general population. Rolex have certainly nailed their marketing, haven't they? Rolex is probably one of the best known brands, not just in the watch industry, but in the world. They spend millions, if not tens, if not hundreds of millions of pounds every single year sponsoring the biggest and best sporting events so that you know that Rolex exists. And although the watch that I bought is perhaps not that well known, it is still incredibly well recognized. If I was to show you just a few small features on the dial or on the case, I'm sure you'd know it instantly. And the second reason I bought this watch is, well, the potential for second-hand prices to increase. I bought this watch new old stock. It is discontinued, which I'll come on to in a minute. And there is a chance that if ever I decide to sell this watch in the future, I'll get at least my money back. And you never know, I might actually make a little bit extra on top of what I paid for it. And that is, of course, what drives a lot of people to go on the waiting lists for Rolex watches. If you're going to spend a lot of money on a watch, it's nice to know it's not going to half in value the moment you walk out the shop. And Rolex watches, well, you can buy a brand new all stainless steel sports Rolex watch, walk straight across the shopping centre in Bluewater, for example, go to Watchfinder and sell it to them and make a tidy profit. Now, that's not the driving force behind me buying this watch, but it does offer a little bit of peace of mind, doesn't it? If you're spending a lot of money on watches, it's nice to know that you're going to recoup at least the same amount back and potentially even a little bit more. And the third reason was availability. I've already mentioned it. This watch is now discontinued, which means it's going to be harder and harder to find in the future. New unworn versions are going to be more difficult to find, more expensive. That is essentially what's driving up the prices. And the fact that this watch is discontinued, and what drives up Rolex prices is the fact that, well, the second-hand market is so strong. Rolex drip feeds watches onto the market intentionally. Certainly the more desirable all stainless steel sports watch models, and those prices increasing and pushes more people to go onto the waiting list, and that again in turn drives up the second-hand prices. Now, the watch that I've bought may not make or earn as much money as a Rolex, but yeah, prices are definitely on the increase. So when the watch arrived and I realized I'd bought this watch for those three reasons, basically, it got me thinking, is this watch still reasonable value for money? And of course, the watch I'm talking about is the Seiko SKX. I bought the SKX 011 J1, a Japan-made orange dial rubber strap SKX, a beautiful watch, actually, 42mm diameter version. It's not the most recognized and most desirable version of this watch. This watch actually retailed in the UK when it was available from the shops for £195, I think it is. I paid £325 for this unworn example, which I didn't think was actually too bad. The most popular and desirable watch is the SKX 077. Believe it or not, that retailed in the UK when it was still being made by Seiko for £349. In my mind, Seiko SKXs, and in particular the 007 and 009 versions, which are the most popular and recognised versions, retailed in the UK for less than £200, but that's simply not the case. According to Seiko, I spoke to them recently, those watches retailed for £349. So yeah, we are seeing them available now, new old stock, for around £800 from some sellers, which is just ridiculous. Most new old stock watches seem to be available for £500 or £600, and I'm talking specifically about the 007 and 009. But you can actually pick them up for a little bit less than that. I wanted to take a look at the SKX with a fresh pair of eyes, because prices for watches on the whole have gone up a lot over the last few years. And with a fresh pair of eyes, I might actually look at the SKX and think it still represents reasonable value for money when bought on the second-hand market. And the other thing I thought about when this watch arrived was, is it possible to build an affordable watch collection with watches that might actually go up in value over the next 5 or 10 years? Yeah, so let me have some suggestions in the comments section. Can you think of any watches that you can still pick up for a reasonable sum of money? And I'm talking about a few £100s here and there. And yeah, do you think they'll go up in value over the next 5 to 10 years? And I'll try to put together some sort of affordable watch collection in a future video. But for today, I'm just going to take a look at this SKX011J1. Can you hear my stomach rumbling? I think I'm hungry. Yeah, once I've filmed this, I'm going to go and get some lunch. But yeah, let's head over to the light box and have a look at this. Well, I'm wearing it now. Look, SKX011. Right, I'm all fed, so now's a good time to show you my latest Chrono 24 purchase. This is the SKX011J1. This watch was only ever available on this rubber strap. You could never get this orange dial variation with a stainless steel bracelet, which is a bit of a shame, isn't it? Good looking watch. The J1 at the end of the model number implies or indicates that it is a watch that was made in Japan for the Japanese domestic market, which makes it a little bit more desirable, but there are almost no differences between the J1 and the K1 series SKX watches. I think generally people are happy just to have either, given they are so difficult to come by these days for reasonable prices. There's still plenty of these out there. It's just the prices from some sellers are just ridiculous, aren't they? Yeah, I really like this color variation. I already have the SKX009 with the Pepsi bezel insert. But yeah, when I saw this one available for £325, I was keen to get it in and add this to my collection. Now, of course, one of the most important components of any automatic watch is the movement, and inside this watch you will find the Seiko 7S26, the probably most entry-level automatic movement that Seiko made while they were producing these watches. It doesn't hack, it doesn't hand wind, but it is, you know, an automatic movement, a very strong, sturdy, and reliable automatic movement, which is basically what you need in a dive watch. And I've put this one on the time grapher, and it's running incredibly well when you consider this watch is almost 6 years old, and I suspect it's not been running for most of those 6 years. Yeah, this one is running beautifully well. Incredible accuracy on the time grapher. Good beat error and amplitude, 53 degrees of lift angle for these movements. Yes, so this one's running fantastic. But despite it running so well, I think the movement is one of the factors that holds people back when they are considering whether or not to fork out close to £500 or £600 for one of these watches, because, well, those movements are generally used in the most affordable Seiko automatic watches, and understandably, I think it just grates people to have to spend that much money on a watch containing that movement. But when you break it down, I mean, it is just a reliable automatic movement. Okay, it doesn't hack, but automatic watches tend to lose their accuracy after a day or so. So is that important? Probably not. It doesn't hand wind, but actually, when it runs out of power, within a few seconds of you picking up one of these watches, the movement has already kicked in. It's incredible, actually, how quickly the second hand moves once you've picked this watch up and just started moving it around a little bit. Of course, you can do the Seiko shuffle. So yeah, they're more irritations than, you know, essential elements to an automatic movement. There is something else that stops this watch from potentially representing reasonable value for money at the prices that people are asking for them these days, and that is the crystal, Hardlex crystal. We have become so accustomed to affordable watches having sapphire crystal. We've been spoiled, basically, that yeah, this watch having Hardlex is considered a real weakness. But of course, one of the reasons these watches are just so iconic and popular is the fact that they are a modder's dream. These watches have to be amongst the most modified watches in the world, and yeah, you can add sapphire crystal and a ceramic bezel insert if you want, but of course you're going to impact the future value. Now, fairly nice bezel action on this one. It is typically Seiko, very smooth and greasy. I like it. Even resistance all the way around. The grip is more than adequate. Yeah, the resistance is nice and even and fairly high, just about right, I think. And the alignment on this one seems to be pretty good. I mean, look at the alignment of the bezel insert, the chapter ring, and the dial at the 12 and at the 6. You're fractionally off at the 6, maybe, but yeah, I think I got lucky with this one. And there is another reason why these watches have always been considered, well, at their more original prices, just ridiculous value. They are ISO 6425 certified divers. Now, they don't meet the current standards or requirements to meet that certification, but at the time when they were being made, they absolutely did. And they represented just, well, fantastic value for money. If you wanted a cheap, affordable dive watch, there really weren't many other options that could compete with this watch in terms of price. Now, I did mention in the introduction that these watches are very recognizable and desirable because of the way they look, and that is absolutely the case. You just need to see the indices on the dial, just even one of the indices, the 6 o'clock index, for example. As soon as you see that shape, you know instantly what watch you're looking at, and the crown guards as well, the location of the crown, and even the case shape and the side profile, that bezel protruding out from the case, that sort of short, stubby case, the lug shapes. There are so many recognizable contours, lines, if you like, elements to this watch, and that again increases the desirability. I remember working in an office a few years ago. I was wearing my SKX 009. I was in a meeting and the guy next to me, who had just joined the company, was wearing an SKX, and we looked at each other's watches, and we instantly knew, you are a watch enthusiast, and we gave one of those little subtle nods of approval. Yeah, this watch really does bring people together. Now, it is impossible for me to tell you definitively whether or not the SKX at today's prices still represents decent value for money, because, well, there are so many factors involved. Every single individual person out there values different things. For some people, the lack of sapphire crystal or the 7S26 movement is a deal breaker. It's what stops them from even entertaining buying one of these watches. For others, it's the fact that they are just so much more expensive these days than their original retail prices. But what I can tell you is the hunt, the search for well, for me, a new old stock example costing, well, what I consider to be a reasonable value for money is half the fun. It's half the battle, if you like. I think that's one of the reasons why people enjoy buying Rolex watches. It's the challenge of getting your hands on something that others consider desirable and, fantastic value for money. And like I've said already, the potential is there for these watches to increase in value. So if you pick up one like this, I think this is a really good example, and I'm really happy with what I've paid for it. You could end up making a few quid on the side, which is always a bit of a bonus. And when you look at the price or the value trackers on Chrono 24, you can see that that is a real possibility. But yeah, for me, the fun is finding an example like this. Honestly, when I saw this on Chrono 24, my heart skipped a beat. I felt like I'd won the lottery, despite the fact that I've actually paid quite a bit over the original retail price for this watch. That's what the watch market has done to us recently. It's changed how we perceive value. Watches are just getting more and more expensive. Everything is getting more and more expensive. So yeah, for me, this watch does represent good value for money still. I wouldn't have paid much more than the £325 I've paid for it, but I'm very happy with what I did pay for it. Right, guys, let me know in the comments section, as I mentioned near the start of the video, if you can think of any affordable watches that could potentially go up in value, and then I'll put together a sort of 5 watch collection of watches that potentially could increase in value over the next 5 or 10 years. And guys, also let me know what you think of this SKX. Was I ripped off? Did I pay way too much money for this orange dial SKX011J1? I look forward to reading your comments. As always, massive thank you from me to you for tuning in, guys. Take care, look after yourselves. You'll see me again very, very soon.